Okay, so these are the steps on how I want you to turn in the project. You're going to include a folder with your first initial and last name. In it will be your portfolio file with a first initial and last name. And next to that file with your first initial and last name, there will be a portfolio folder that'll include the project as it's going to be uploaded to the internet if you were to do that. So the idea is that you want to stay as organized as possible and not have additional files saved and not know which files you're going to need for the client. So this is how you would set that up. And this is also going to be more useful for bringing in a CSS background. Okay, so I'll go ahead and save this, and I'm going to create a new folder in my final project folder. And this will be, if I were a student, what I would be turning in. In here I'm going to rename my file with my first initial and last name, and I'll save that there. Okay, now I want to, if you have something selected, your properties are going to not include what I want them to have. So click on the background of the stage, and that'll get you to the properties for the document. And what I want you to do is, first of all, make sure that your center to stage and responsive is set. But we're also going to determine where we want the files to be saved. So we're going to click here, and we're going to create a new folder. And this folder we're going to be calling Portfolio. Okay, and we'll hit OK. And we'll save this. And so now when we publish, everything is going to go in here. And so we'll just give that a quick run. And we'll go to our browser and make sure everything is working correctly. Okay, so now I want to bring in a CSS file. And I have a CSS file. And I'll put this over here in the main directory. I don't need any of this other than setting up everything in the right folder, and we're going to go over that in a second. I generated this file with Adobe Illustrator, and it's this pattern in here. And so what it generates is this PNG file, and then I went ahead and set up an HTML file that uses the background that it generates. So right now it looks like this. It's this crazy color that's been established with the CSS. The CSS file, that's this one, that can be edited. So if we click on this, we can come over here and give it a new color. So I'll do a dark, and I'll do a dark gray. I'll save that, and then back over here on the for CSS HTML, I can hit the space bar and see what the pattern's doing. So in the Adobe Illustrator, if you're curious, this is just a simple polygon shape. And what I did is I just saved this whole file for the web output. And in here you can modify the size. So if you wanted to make it smaller or bigger, you can increase this number. And since it's vector graphics, it's going to scale fairly nicely. So if I wanted to make this a lot smaller, I'd probably go like with 40. And then I'd go ahead and save it. And I'm going to save it in my AI folder right there and replace the old one. And now in here, I'm done in Illustrator. And I'll save that. And now over here, I can see my tiny little pattern that I created. Obviously, I'm not really interested in this pattern specifically. It's just a matter of showing you how to bring in a background pattern into Animate. Okay, so back to the project. So in here, in this portfolio is where the assets are going to be saved. So we're currently working on the project. So we're going to go to the window drop-down menu, and we're going to slide down to our components. and then we're going to go grab the component parameters. And off to the side over here, I'm going to grab my CSS component. It doesn't have to be anywhere on the stage or off. It's not going to show up. It's just referencing the fact that we're going to be using this component to get our CSS file. So over here in the source, I'm going to go ahead and double click on this. And here's my folder. And I'll back up here a little bit. Go to the AI file. And here I'm going to reference this file over here. So that'll be my file. I'll hit open. Okay, so now it's not going to show up where you think it's going to show up. It's not going to stay there. It's going to be copied and moved over to the project folder that you'll be turning in. And right now when I do a preview of it, we won't see the background at all. And that's because the file isn't being saved with the background. It's only saving the CSS file. So if we go back to the desktop over here, we're actually done with brackets. So if we come over here to the desktop, inside the portfolio project, you see that there was an assets folder. That's where the CSS file is. And so now all we have to do is go to the AI file and grab the PNG file it's using. And so I'm going to make a copy of this and drag it into the assets folder. And so that's part of it. And from here on out, if I do a reload here, it loads in with the pattern. And from here on out, I can keep on regenerating this. The image file isn't going to go away unless you take it out. So if I make some other change in here, let's say I want to change the background to something else, and then I run this, and then in the preview, it still remembers that asset file in there. So the nice thing about having the CSS file is then you can go ahead and make modifications to it. And you can add backgrounds, you can add drop shadows to the canvas. You're modifying the HTML5 directly. So if you want to modify the CSS file, you have to modify this one here, the original CSS file, not the one that's inside the assets. Every time you generate the HTML and JavaScript assets with an FLA file, it'll regenerate based on what this is. So this is the one that's used to generate this. So remember, any changes need to be taking place over here. Okay, so that's it. I hope that helps.